My name is Reginald Clark, and I am one of the team members on the evaluation component of the Repairing the Breach initiative. And I will be the first up talking a little bit about what we did in the context of the initiative. And I'm happy to be here today with one of my colleagues, Walter Allen, who worked with us directly on our piece of the evaluation. And I'm also happy to be here with Ron Ferguson, who did some work regarding the evaluations in the initiative as well. So our role here, as I understand it, is to give you a little insight into what we did and what we discovered in terms of what made a difference in terms of the Repairing the Breach initiative. I'm going to try to, I will be brief, I have to be brief, but there's a lot that we did, and so I'm just going to hit some key points because of the 10-minute limit that we have. I will tell you that we responded to, Walter and I responded to an RFP from the Repairing the Breach initiative asking for us to put together a proposal to do some work on a Kellogg Foundation sponsored cluster evaluation. Cluster evaluation was a unique concept to some of us at the time because it's an evaluation model that says you're not here to find out what people are doing that's wrong, you're here to find out what people are doing that's right, and what they're doing that's wrong, you're here to show them that in such a way that they can improve upon it. And that's the whole Kellogg model. And about a year into the actual funding of most of the programs, we were brought into the picture, which has to do with a recommendation I'm going to make at the end of my remarks in terms of how evaluation should be tied in from the beginning. But in any event, we took up the mantle at that point, and we first did a baseline assessment of who was in the programs and how many people and all of the baseline data, demographic type data. Then we came back in a few months and did a pre-test where we actually tried to assess where people's heads were and where people's behavior patterns were. And the goal was to see if we could come back a year later and do a post-test and see what changes had been made in that time frame. And we did not do a randomized assessment or anything like that. Again, in these evaluation efforts, usually I would say, the evaluation kind of does not get the resources that it would need to do that level of analysis. But we worked with what we did and what we had, and we're able to do some nice multivariate analyses and come up with some hunches. I won't call them conclusions, but hunches about what was making a difference and why it was making a difference. One of the things that Bobby, Dr. Austin, shared with us this morning is that they had this broad-based idea about what the goals were, and it involved making these human connections, the polis, the public works, civic stories. Dr. Austin's presentation this morning explained those concepts to us. Our job was then to take those concepts and see how we could demonstrate whether they were, some of that was actually going on as a result of these programs. There were 30 programs that we looked at. Most of them were in the eastern states and in the southern states. There were maybe a couple on the West Coast, but the West Coast was not equally represented in where these programs were located. What we were able to discover is that we could classify or cluster these programs into 3 villages based on the goals of the service delivery for the programs. And those villages we called the Entrepreneurial Leadership Village, which focused on developing entrepreneurial skills among the participants primarily, the Personal and Academic Leadership Village, which focused on personal and academic development of the participants, and the Family and Community Leadership Village, which focused on building up family and community among the participants in those programs. We were able to discover through our research that indeed there were some connections between what was going on in those programs and key indicators of what I'm going to call constructive lifestyle among the participants. In particular, one that I'm going to point out is that we did a time assessment. We actually clocked, or got them to clock actually, what they did for an entire week, a 168-hour week, and they actually completed a protocol that said what they did every half-hour increment for a week. And we did a pre-post test on that, and we were able to discover that those students or participants in these different villages in the programs, when they participated more in the programs, they tended to spend less time in unconstructive things like watching television and using drugs and alcohol, and they tended to more likely have higher grades and educational goals, volunteer activities more, and those kinds of things that would be considered as constructive. We also discovered another key point is that the student-staff ratio was critical to the growth that these youngsters experienced. Those programs that had more staff, and that could include the paid staff plus the volunteer staff, to work with the young people, the more staff they had in comparison to the number of students, the more likely it was that the students would say that they were spending their time constructively and that they had attitudes and goals toward education, higher levels of education. So staff size is critical in that it also affected, staff size affected the outreach that the directors were doing into the communities, and even the number of proposals that they were able to write to get more money. And so it was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you were inundated with trying to help a lot of young people, you really didn't have time to do the kinds of things that it would take to maintain your program effectively. Plus, the people you were helping, you were only partially helping them because you were overloaded, basically. And that was I thought that was a useful discovery. And it says something, too, about funding of programs. One evaluation challenge that I'll comment on is that I think that in the future, the programs do need to start with the evaluation component at the very beginning, and it needs to be able to follow participants over a longer period than, say, 6 months or a year, as we did. In fact, it ideally should follow participants for at least a decade to see what kinds of long-term sustained impacts these programs are having. We also found that in terms of programming, too many of the programs were struggling to keep their doors open. And again, this goes back to resource issues which affect the fidelity and the sustainability of the programs. They were challenged to really do what I feel, and this is me talking, that is going to make the largest impact, and that is that in each one of these programs, I actually feel that they should have a component that not only does what the Eisenhower program was talking about in the previous panel, where you have the students going through some kind of mentoring and training and life skills development and et cetera. But every single one of these programs needs to have some component where at least for a couple of months or a summer, the kids get paid to actually do some work, get a job. In Chicago, for example, some of you may be familiar with the recent statistic that 90% of the black males don't have any work. 90% of young black males. And to be honest with you, there's no elixir to build self-esteem like having a few dollars in your pocket. I mean, that's just the bottom line on that. And so to me, that needs to be an integral part of every single one, even if it's a small piece. But that's not possible in most of these programs because of resource issues. I like the idea, for example, of teaching everyone how to start a small business as a possible way of getting to that. Another key point that I want to make is that after school and mentoring programs will only work to a point if the schools and the jobs are not there for them. The reality is that other work that I have done finds that the quality of the instruction in the school, the quality of the teaching staff have a huge impact on how students do on standardized tests. And so it's if that's working as well as the initiatives directed toward African American males, so much the better in terms of the likelihood that they're going to do well. Another key point that I want to make quickly is that we need to avoid narratives that pathologize black males. And it's a delicate balance, I think, in talking about the role of personal responsibility and versus the role of social structures. And you've heard people talk or refer to we need to focus on capacity, not deficit, and so on. And the reality is that by the time these young fellows have been through so much drama, there's probably a little bit of there's a lot of capacity, and there's probably a little bit of feelings of defeat and some other not so positive emotions that they're dealing with and trying to wrestle with. But we, as program developers, I think, need to keep it clear in our minds that black male failure is not due to a lack of their fathers. In fact, I'm for example, from a household where there was no father from the time of 5 years old. My mother was on welfare. We lived in the projects. And I know some of my colleagues on this panel and in this room were in the same situation. We have presidents who had no fathers. So to try to blame it on that, I think is a wrong approach. Now, that's not to say I don't think fathers matter. Certainly they matter. But to say that it's a necessary and sufficient condition for success is just false. My work 30 years ago in my book, Family Life and School Achievement, Why Poor Black Children Succeed or Fail, made that point poignantly, I think. The book is still in print, and University of Chicago Press published it because it did show case studies of people in these different family structures who were succeeding and some who were failing. So I was able to show just in that way that it goes deeper than that. And again, what I discovered is both there and as well as in our research here is that you have to look at what people do with their time. We all are endowed with 168 hours a week in our lives. It's what we do with those 168 hours. It seems to be a much bigger determinant of success or failure. The other thing is to not fall into the myth of us thinking that there's a lack of desire to work. This is something that we hear often. Oh, they just, they're not working because they're too lazy. I need to do this hit this YouTube piece. Thank you. I want to show you something. This is from Chicago.
That fucking line go down 3 blocks right there.
And excuse the language. This is the street.
This the 4th block. I'm dead damn serious. This the 4th fucking block. Like, they wouldn't believe us if we didn't film this shit. 3 blocks wrapped around 4th block. And this make 5. We crossed the alley. That's 5 motherfucking blocks. It's an emergency. That shit is ridiculous, man. Yeah. Somebody save me. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's 5, 6 fucking blocks. If we turn here, there will be 6 blocks. It's an emergency. They're trying to sell gummy bears and shit. No. This is the 6th block. Wrap back around. Basically what they do is they need to just take you out. Somebody save me. Because if they don't,
This should be all.
Like I said, this is what they should have did when you registered. They should have took that ticket out and did like a raffle to call people in for interviews, like the best candidates. I think this is gonna be 7 months though. You know, look at these motherfuckers. I told you they got chairs and shit. Damn, why you doing that? That's how you go now. Nah, don't you hear them people say they done?
Okay. Black people in Chicago. Looking for a job in 10-degree weather. So, you know, when people try to throw out that stereotype that they don't want to work, I said, okay, let's take a look at this. And this is that can be repeated. That's repeated all over the country whenever you find a situation where there's a lot of jobs, or like they'll say 50 jobs, and you get 500 people show up, that sort of thing. We are indeed continue to be in a depression. It goes beyond a recession. And the other thing is that we don't hear enough or see enough images like this one, which is, I believe, far more frequent in our communities, where we see young black people like these people. Somebody told me they think this is in a D.C. subway. I'm not sure. You see what's going on there. But you don't see that on TV. You don't see the other one even on TV, the one I just showed with these people, regardless of their circumstances, they might not be the most literate or the most well-dressed, but they're out there in 10-degree weather looking for that job. And so I just want to suggest that any conceptualization of these programs needs to include those elements, and particularly, as I said, the work element as a part of the program planning. The Thurgood Marshall said, none of us got where we are solely by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We got here because somebody, a parent, a teacher, an Ivy League crony, or a few nuns, and in my case it was actually a few nuns, bent down and helped us pick up our boots. So thank you very much.